Hi, I'm Jess. Welcome to On My Shelf. So today the book that I'm going to be talking about is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. I first started reading her books when I read Verity, which was incredibly creepy and really tantalizingly good. And I didn't know it, but apparently she primarily writes romances. So when I picked Ugly Love up, I was actually reading it with a friend, but I had anticipated a thriller kind of novel. It is not, but I'm going to go ahead and do a review on it anyway. So at the beginning of Ugly Love, we meet Tate. She's a young nurse in her 20s, and she moves in with her brother Corbin, and across the hall from her brother lives his friend Miles. And so right away, there's some tension with Tate and Miles. And Miles is really a distant kind of guy, definitely not. My cat just knocked over a plant. Sorry about that. So, he's definitely not an available guy emotionally or otherwise, even though he's not in a relationship, and Tate continues to kind of try to see what's going on with him. She's definitely really interested in Miles. And this love story is told in two different timelines. So the first timeline that we're introduced to is when Tate meets Miles. The second timeline is talking about Miles and his previous girlfriend, Rachel, who was his high school love, his first love. So I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit first about Tate and Miles, and then I will tell you what happens the rest. So with Tate and Miles, she's interested in him, but nothing really happens. There's a lot of tension going on between the two of them. They end up going to her parents' house for Thanksgiving with her brother Corbin, and Miles ends up injured, and since Tate is a nurse, she stitches him up while at the house. And Miles is a super tough guy, and while she's stitching him up, he doesn't flinch or anything. He just takes the stitches without any anesthetic, and while this is happening, there's an interaction between them, and Miles actually kisses Tate, and so she kind of is trying to figure out what's going on with this guy. Is he into me? Is he not into me? And they end up kissing again later that night in the kitchen, and her dad finds them. And so there's kind of just like this will they, won't they the whole time with them. And then we kind of find out why Miles is so unavailable, even though he's not dating anybody and he's clearly interested in Tate as well. And what we find out with that is that there was a girl back in high school, his first love. Her name's Rachel. And I will tell you what. I'll tell you the first thing that if I can find the passage, I'm going to tell you about the first time that they meet. He and Rachel meets. So, let's see. He meets her in the office at school. And he sees her and is like, wow, this girl is incredibly gorgeous. And he ends up walking her to class, and he says, Rachel, Rachel, Rachel. She's like poetry, like prose and love letters and lyrics cascading down the center of a page. Rachel, Rachel, Rachel. And instantly, falls in love with Rachel. And one of the things that he says is, you're gonna fall in love with me, Rachel. She's mine, but I don't say anything. I don't have to, because the only one who needs to be aware that I want Rachel is Rachel. And I found a couple of things that I thought were really interesting about this book is Miles and Tate's relationship seems to be really juvenile, and while there's a lot of attraction from both of them, a lot of it just seems like very young, and that Tate is very young, very inexperienced, and also just really immature. But I really did not end up liking their love story very much at all, but I really enjoyed the story with Rachel and Miles, because even though they are the ones that are young, their love seems a lot more mature. And even though there's a lot of problematic um, passages, I felt like there's all of these little sticky notes that I made in the book, and a lot of those are because I saw this passage and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I cannot. Like, one of the sticky notes that I have is eye roll. My thoughts aren't thoughts anymore. My thoughts are Rachel. And that was one where I sticky noted eye roll. And I also said, but Rachel's not a thing, when he says, but Rachel is mine. I want Rachel for my birthday. I want Rachel for Christmas. I want Rachel for graduation. And I just put WTF. So there's a lot of things in here that I found really problematic or very strange. But that being said, I really did enjoy the story between Rachel and Miles. And of course, we end up finding out clearly this didn't really end well, because we know that Miles is really just unavailable emotionally, and so we know that it didn't end well, but kind of what you're trying to find out during the book is why and what happened with Rachel. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that now. So this is going to be spoilers. Please don't watch if you do not want to find out what happened in this book. So with that being said, what happened is, it turns out that Rachel's mom has a boyfriend, and Miles's dad has a girlfriend, and of course the parents end up being in a relationship with each other. So it ends up being really strange, because Rachel and Miles end up moving in together as kind of stepbrother and stepsister kind of situation, even though the parents aren't married yet. And but they end up falling in love anyway, and Rachel ends up pregnant, and they end up having to tell their parents. And Miles's dad hits him, throws him out of the house, but eventually they begin to accept the relationship between the two of them. And while they're not supportive of the pregnancy and the relationship and everything, they kind of begrudgingly accept it, and everybody is living together. And then Rachel has the baby, which is a very emotionally and well-written passage. But on the way back from the hospital, they're in a car crash, and the baby is killed, and Rachel just can't stand to look at Miles anymore, and so they end up breaking up and moving across the country. And that's what's going on with Miles, and why he hasn't been in a relationship for like more than 5 or 6 years. He hasn't been in a relationship or with anybody since the death of his and Rachel's baby. So upon finding out all of this, Miles ends up traveling to meet Rachel and her new husband, and they have a baby, and he kind of feels finally at last that he can be in a relationship with somebody new. And so he realizes that he's in love with Tate, and basically then they have their happily ever after. So I am going to tell you a couple of other passages from the book, because I have so many here that are sticky noted. And I found a lot of this book really problematic, and I read a couple of other Colleen Hoover books that were not Verity, and I feel like it's kind of just a common theme in a lot of her books, where there's just this young, helpless girl who's really naive, and she needs a man, and I really don't care for that. So I just don't think that Colleen Hoover is my kind of writer. But here is one. So when Tate is first moving into her brother's apartment, one of the things that she says is, there are 2 bedrooms, so I take the one that isn't Corbin's and set my suitcase on top of the bed. That's fine. I have about 3 more suitcases and at least 6 boxes down in the car, not to mention all my clothes on hangers, but I'm not about to attempt those tonight. Corbin said he'll be back in the morning, so I'll leave that to him. And Tate, as well as many other Colleen Hoover characters, seem to really just need a man to do this things for them, and I just really don't care for that at all. I don't know, and it's another interesting passage on the same page is let's see. Blake, who is one of Corbin's friends, she ends up dating him, and Blake told me that he wanted to make our relationship official. The problem Blake didn't foresee was how Corbin would react once Blake broke my heart. And boy, did he break it. As much as a 15-year-old can be broken after the span of a 2-week secret relationship. Once Corbin found out, their friendship was over, and all of Corbin's friends were warned not to come near me. I found it almost impossible to date in high school until after Corbin moved away. Even then, though, the guys had heard stories intended to steer clear of Corbin's little sister. So I know that's kind of an old trope, but it's just really misogynistic. Let's see. Detention is something every male in high school should accomplish at least once. And that was from Miles. So that's just, I don't know what to think about that. I definitely don't hope for my son to be going to detention at all. Let's see. What's another one? And I'm very sorry if Colleen Hoover is watching this that I'm kind of tearing apart the book, but there's just a lot here. Oh, one thing that I forgot to mention is one of the first nights, the first time that Tate meets Miles, she steps over him. He's drunk in the hallway, and he's like, Rachel, Rachel. And she ends up kind of dragging him into the apartment and leaving him on the couch, I believe. And then while she is in her room, he just kind of walks in, which is pretty weird. And she like slams the door in his face. And then he just like, I don't know, comes in the room again, which is really weird. And like, if a guy did that to me, I definitely would not be interested in dating him, but maybe that's just me. And some notes that I had is, Tate can't seem to carry her own stuff, doesn't seem to own her sexuality, pushes gender roles like girls decorating for men, and also seems smug. High school Miles takes a picture of Rachel discreetly, wants to own her apparently, and is very melodramatic, although I have to say, like, I think I liked his writing the best out of everyone's. But he really does take a picture of Rachel. She's sitting there in class, and he takes a picture and sends it to his friend, which I just found off the charts weird. That's a very weird thing to do. Adult Miles seems weird and like he has no boundaries and also doesn't understand them. He barges into Tate's room and tells her what to do, and let's see. Corbin apparently has a thing about keeping his sister away from boys even as an adult, which I put toxic masculinity. Let's see. I don't know. So, and I also wrote like Gilmore Girls syndrome, Tate. So one thing about, you know, like how in Gilmore Girls, like everywhere Rory goes, somebody has a crush on her, or everywhere Lorelai goes, like an age-appropriate male has a crush on her. And Tate seems to have like the same like Gilmore Girls syndrome where like everywhere they go, someone is falling in love with them, which is pretty common, of course, in romance novels, but just that's probably why I don't read more of them. Tate says that she has a sudden urge to take her credit card straight to the store and buy Miles some curtains, a new set of vibrant dishes, a few paintings, and maybe even a plant or two. This place needs a little life. I wonder what his story is. I don't think he has a girlfriend. I've yet to see him with one up to this point, and the apartment An obvious lack of female's touch makes it a likely assumption. I don't think a girl could walk into this apartment without decorating it at least a little bit before she's left. So I'm assuming girls just never walk into this apartment. Um, um, she starts washing Miles's dishes, so he walks up behind her and asks, "Are you washing my dishes?" And he kind of catches her off guard, and she ends up dropping a glass, but catches it before it breaks. And she says, "Finished my homework," I say, swallowing the thickness that just swelled in my throat. I looked at the dishes that are now on the strainer. They were dirty. Um, and so there's just a lot of little things like that. One, my favorite passage out of this whole book is so Miles walks in. His shirt isn't buttoned. I'm staring at his stomach. Stop staring at his stomach. Oh my word, he has the V. Those beautiful indentations on men that run the length of their outer abdominal muscles, disappearing beneath their jeans as if the indentations are pointing to a secret bullseye. So that is hands down the thing that I made fun of most in this book, is the secret bullseye. But overall, I really did enjoy, even though they didn't end up together, I really, really enjoyed Rachel and Miles's love story. That one was my favorite, hands down. And I kind of wish that they were in game, but they're not. In the end, Tate and Miles do end up getting together. And I hope I said that I enjoyed Rachel and Miles, because that's what I meant. I enjoyed Rachel and Miles's love story, which is really, it's really well written. It's very deep, and it is excruciatingly sad, because again, their baby dies when leaving the hospital, but it was very well written, and so that was the one that I enjoyed the most. So I still felt, even though I did pick on the writing a lot, I really enjoyed Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. And again, this is on my shelf. Thanks again for listening. Bye.